what is this about? What are we celebrating today? I really want to know. And he looked at me and he got so angry. He got so triggered. And he told me, why do you ask me such a thing? I'm here to celebrate. My father celebrated. My grandpa celebrated. So we are here to celebrate as well. So why do you ask me such stupid questions? Listening to all of those Christian apologists, I thought that somehow by just reading the Quran, I'm going to find so much evil and the devil will present himself to me in this book. And then I will declare Christ is king and I will return to Christianity stronger than ever. And a quote pops into mind from Habib, who said that regular people don't judge Islam by Quran and Hadith. They're not reading Quran and Hadith. They are reading the Muslims.
The following is a conversation with Bobby from Bobby's perspective, a man from Macedonia who discovered Islam through reading the Holy Quran. Bobby's search for the truth led him through Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and shamanism, back to Christianity, and finally to Islam. In this insightful interview, he shares his journey of faith, the challenges he faced, and the moments of clarity that brought him to embrace Islam. Join us as we delve into Bobby's inspiring story and his reflections on this transformative path.
So originally I'm from the small country called Northern Macedonia. This is where my parents are from. Later they migrated to Germany. In Northern Macedonia, the main religion demographically would be Orthodox Christianity. However, we still have a very, very substantial Muslim minority within Macedonia, which is at least 30%. And this is just an estimate. It could be higher as well. 30%, they say, counted. Maybe it is 35, maybe it is even 40 nowadays. I believe that it's a political reason because predominantly the practicing Muslims in Macedonia are Albanian, of Albanian ethnicity. And I believe that the politicians in Macedonia try to diminish the population of the Albanians slightly. And this is why they say it's 30%. It might be even higher. But when it comes down to practicing religion, I believe that Islam is the actual dominantly practiced religion in Macedonia, because when it comes down to Orthodox Christianity, judging it by my family and surroundings, most people are not truly practicing, nor are they very knowledgeable on the subject matter. So nobody can truly tell you about what the Trinity is, who's supposed to be the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit, etc., etc. So most people are cultural Christians on the Balkan, but I wouldn't say that they are even going to church on Sunday. If you compare that to Islam, even a very basic practicing Muslim will at least go to Jummah. So therefore, again, the official numbers are 30% Islam, 70% Orthodox Christianity in Northern Macedonia, but I believe that it actually is the other way around in terms of practicing religion. Anyways, that being said, as I mentioned, my parents migrated to Germany. In Germany, the dominant religion, at least this is what we've been told in school, was Catholicism and Protestantism. But I would make the claim that the main religion in Germany is most definitely liberal atheism. That is most definitely the religion there. People don't believe in God in the West. They don't practice their religion. They don't go to church. Anyhow, be that as it may, I grew up in that environment and I was shaped by both countries ultimately.
Mm. What did you think about Muslims and Islam before you started learning about it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, coming originally from Northern Macedonia, I've been told the classical Orthodox Christian Balkan history lesson, which means the Ottomans came over and they enslaved us, especially our women. They took over, they destroyed our churches, they wanted to force convert everybody, but then in the Ilinden uprising, we finally defeated the Turks, kicked them out, and since then we can live our Christian life again. This was the claim. And so therefore I've been told that Islam is something very, very violent that simply wants to conquer us. Later on, I actually had somewhat of an experience pointing towards that as well, because there was a civil war in Macedonia, this time against the Albanians. And yeah, I've been told again that this is Christianity against Islam, and the Muslims try to destroy our country, take over our country. And matter of fact, many atrocities happened during war, as it always is with war. So, for example, certain Albanians destroyed churches, they set them on fire. And yeah, this is why I got this picture again. Okay, this is about religion, apparently, because now the Muslims, the evil Muslims, they're burning down our churches here. And yeah, therefore, I thought that Islam is something violent, something that always goes hand in hand with war, with conquering. And I got a similar impression then growing up in Germany, because in Germany, I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood, you could say, surrounded by violence, drugs, all kinds of criminality, even so far so that you saw so-called Muslims being involved in prostitution and many other things that I don't want to mention now. So the worst of the worst, basically. And this is why I got a very negative image, to say the very least, on Islam. But the reality is, of course, that if I think about it, if I think back, I only thought that I hated Islam. I only thought that I had a negative perception of Islam, but I had a negative perception of certain people because I didn't know anything about Islam whatsoever. And this is why nowadays, even when I see people online and they tell me that they hate Islam or they see Islam as something negative, I'm thinking to myself that they only believe that they do, but they don't really know the religion at all. And a quote pops into mind from Habib, who said that regular people don't judge Islam by Quran and Hadith. They're not reading Quran and Hadith. They are reading the Muslims. And therefore, the people that I was surrounded by, the Muslims that I was surrounded by, gave me a very tainted image of Islam.
Can you share your journey toward discovering the one true religion of Almighty God? What experiences and realizations guided you along this path?
Okay, so as I said, growing up, I had a tainted image of Islam, and therefore, to say that I put Islam on the back burner wouldn't even be right. I simply never thought about Islam. I discarded it completely. I didn't see it as a viable option whatsoever. I was a cultural Christian. I grew up as an Orthodox Christian by affiliation, by nationality. But in my 20s, I got disheartened with the faith because I didn't truly find any spiritual truths within Christianity at that point. I even remember I gave away my cross necklace coming from the Balkan, birthdays, or any other celebrations. Family members usually give you golden crosses and chains and necklaces and whatnot. But when I was in my early 20s, I put it off for the very first time because I realized I don't really believe in Christianity. Nevertheless, I wasn't an atheist. I couldn't understand the atheist mind either. As I said, in Germany, most people are atheistic, but I couldn't not believe in God. I did believe in God, but I simply stopped believing in organized religion. And it was in my mid 20s then that I got disheartened with the whole situation in Germany. As I said, I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood. Plenty of things happened, and I simply wanted to see what the rest of the world has to offer. And the only solution that I got was back then a working holiday visa, which will enable me to work in Australia. So I packed my bags, sold my car, and simply left. This was 2014. I left with the pursuit of finding truth even back then. I honestly wanted to know what life is about. I always had this question. People would say, yeah, well, when you grow up, every kid asks those questions. But I was really persistent. My mother tells me about this to this very day. I couldn't stop asking questions. I always needed to know about everything. For example, I will never forget this. We were invited at a Serbian family, very good friends of ours, and they invited us for a holiday. I believe it was Sveti Nikola. So, anyways, we're sitting there, and the father of one of my best friends, he must have been in his 40s at that time, he's sitting, he's drinking alcohol, he's eating pork, he's having the time of his life, right? And I really, out of curiosity, asked him, hey man, what is this about? What are we celebrating today? I really want to know. And he looked at me and he got so angry, he got so triggered. And he told me, why do you ask me such a thing? I'm here to celebrate. My father celebrated, my grandpa celebrated. So we are here to celebrate as well. So why do you ask me such stupid questions? He got really, really triggered. And this is when I realized, he's getting triggered because he simply doesn't know and he doesn't want to be in that position where he's exposed. Matter of fact, he simply wants to follow what his ancestors followed, right? And this, of course, reminds us of a surah in the Quran, right? When they are following what the ancestors followed, but they were not guided either. Anyway, so this is a little fast forward spoiler. But this is when I realized, nobody truly knows what they're doing. People are affiliated with religions and they have no clue about it and they still go along. But I needed to know. And so when I left to Australia, I tried to understand the Aboriginals over there. I visited first some Aboriginal camps. I want to understand their native religions. Then I got into psychedelics, which are certain plants, if you will, such as mushrooms, but other chemical variants of that as well, where I explored all kinds of spiritual realms, if you will. I really dive deep into it. But all of it wasn't so satisfactory. So I thought, let's look into other religions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism. And matter of fact, my journey continued. From Australia, I went over to Indonesia, and now most people would think Indonesia is majority Muslim. Yes, but I went to Bali at first, and Bali was still Hindu slash Buddhist. And this is where I, for the first time, encountered Buddhist temples. I spent some time over there. Then later on, traveled to Thailand, where I actually spent time in a Buddhist monastery with the monks, meditating. They were kind of abusing me as a foreigner there. I was sweeping the floor as well. I was doing all the dirty work, but meditating, fasting, all of those things, I really tried to understand what this reality is about. And it went so far even that I came to the conclusion that even Buddhism and Hinduism, even though they are older religions, way older, I thought, than Christianity, for example, or even Islam, therefore they must be truer. But I thought there must be an original religion which has nothing to do with those man made institutions. And that then led me to the Amazon rainforest, where I met the shamans, the so called medicine men of South America, where I drank ayahuasca, which is another psychotropic brew, if you will. I learned the whole recipe. I learned how to brew it. I learned the rituals of them, the rain dances and whatnot. So I spent time with the indigenous people in the jungle, drinking ayahuasca and getting into altered states of consciousness, if you will, to understand what this life is about. And at first, it seemed that they do have the answers. For example, it's quite fascinating, truly. If you look into ayahuasca, it is a brew, as I said, but it is composed of two plants. One plant contains DMT, which is the active ingredient, but your body, when you ingest DMT, actually cancels out DMT in your gut acid and doesn't absorb it. So even if you would eat something that contains DMT, you wouldn't absorb anything. However, they came to the conclusion that there is another plant that cancels that effect out. So now you would say, well, that sounds maybe not so spectacular. But you have to keep in mind that in the Amazon rainforest, you have 500,000 different plants. And those guys, without any chemistry degree or whatnot, came to the conclusion that you have to combine exactly those two plants, and then you essentially have this magical brew that sends you on a journey. And so for me, this was absolutely fascinating. I couldn't comprehend how people would have found out about this. And so I asked even the shamans, how did you find out about this? And they would tell me, the plants told us. So make it even more mysterious. I was like, wow, this is it, right? I found the Holy Grail. So as I said, I spent quite some time with them as well, trying to find truth within those experiences. And I don't want to discard it because it was most definitely part of my process. But looking back, there were many demonic jinn type encounters, of course, in those experiences. But back then, I didn't truly realize it yet. However, going through all of those different practices, so as we mentioned, Buddhism, Hinduism, shamanism, psychedelics, even New Ageism, which is, in a nutshell, spiritual but not religious, which you see nowadays quite often. This is when you start mixing everything and you're making yourself God ultimately, where you tell yourself, I can pick a little bit of Buddhism, I can pick a little bit of Hinduism, I can pick a little bit of the shamanism and whatnot and combine it. I did all of those things, but then ultimately I felt completely empty, but completely empty like never before. And I will never forget this day. It was actually in Thailand. I was standing on my balcony. I was thinking to myself, man, now you did everything you could. You tried every practice there is, and you feel absolutely destroyed and left alone. How can that be? And so I tried to remember when I felt whole. And I felt whole when I was a kid, when I was praying to God alone. Because as I said, yes, I come from an Orthodox Christian background, but all my father ever told me was that there is only one God, and that God is greater than anything else. That's it. My father didn't know anything about the Trinity. And so this is how I prayed as a kid. I would just pray to that one God and done deal. I didn't pray to Jesus. I didn't pray to Mary. None of those sorts. So this is what I got reminded of. And so therefore, the only way to return to that wholeness again, I thought, was by coming back to Orthodox Christianity. Because what else is there? Surely not Islam, right? Why would it be? Islam can't be. And so I returned to Orthodox Christianity, so to speak, but for the first time now, I actually started studying it deeply. So at first I read the whole Bible, then I started reading the church fathers, but all of that wasn't enough for me because I really wanted to understand. And this is when I left to Greece now, because I knew that in Greece there is a little island called Mount Athos, on which you have the OG Orthodox Christianity, if you will, an island that hasn't been changed for over 1,200 years by now. This island is inhabited only by men, and no woman is allowed to step foot on that island. Only men, nobody else. So you only have monks, bishops, archbishops, deacons, and whatnot, and they are practicing Orthodox Christianity the way that was established from the Nicene Creed out on. And this is basically the Mecca for Orthodox Christians. So I thought, well, makes sense to visit that then to get closer to my faith, to truly understand. However, getting there was quite problematic because I didn't take into consideration that you need a specific visa, you need a specific permit to enter certain monasteries. I didn't know that. So I got my visa, but I didn't get the permit. And so I started wondering off, asking if I can sleep in one of those monasteries, because ultimately, otherwise, I would have to sleep somewhere in the forest, somewhere on those mountains. And at first, nobody let me in, believe it or not. And I got disheartened again. I said, okay, what kind of love your neighbor theology is this? Christians always say, love your neighbor, right? And they don't even let me in to sleep here in the monastery. Matter of fact, many people warned me that on Mount Athos, you even have wolves at night. So, yeah, that was an extra for me. So I was running around through the forest, through the mountains, imagining I'm hearing a ooh and whatnot, got kind of freaked out there. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was the wind. But nevertheless, I was seeking the whole day, and then at night, ultimately, I found a monastery that would let me in. And I was so grateful to God. I'm like, whoa, thank God I don't have to sleep outside here. I'm not going to get eaten by wolves tonight. And so I got welcomed by the monks and by the priests, and they look at me and they say, wow, Mother Mary must have sent you. And I cringed. Generally, I cringed and it felt so wrong. It felt so evil even. I can't even put it into words. I was shocked. Because for me, it was crystal clear. How would it have been Mother Mary that led me here? It doesn't even make sense. Where would I begin? Why would it have to be Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus? It doesn't make sense. If anything, God led me here, nobody else, right? That was clear to me. If anybody saved me from sleeping in the wilderness, it must have been God. Why would it be Mary? But they were convinced that was Mary. And so my journey there continued. I spent a few days in the monasteries, then another monastery, and everybody was just talking about Mary, Jesus, certain other political, theological discussions, but nobody really mentioned God. And for me, it was clear that my journey should have led me to God, right? To what else? Why would I subscribe to a so-called monotheistic faith when it doesn't bring me closer to God? It was crazy to me. Anyhow, that being said, I left the Mecca of Orthodox Christianity and I didn't feel spiritually renewed at all. For me, I was left with even more questions. And this is when I decided to do some more research. At first, I started looking on YouTube and I started watching a few debates. And the Muslims started making sense, obviously, duh. But I said to myself, okay, they have some good debate strategies and tactics here. I have to become stronger in my Christian dawah. I have to learn about them. And I don't know if you know the saying, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, right? So I said to myself, okay, this is exactly what I have to do. And therefore, now I have to read the enemy's book. This is really what I thought back then. As crazy as it sounds, may Allah forgive me. I thought I'm going to read the enemy's book now. And once I read the whole thing, I'm going to be so strong in my own Christian faith and I will be so knowledgeable about Islam that I will be able to dismantle Islam altogether. I really thought so highly of myself. Unbelievable. But seeing people such as David Wood and the likes, I thought, yeah, that's what they did. They read the Quran and now they're very knowledgeable, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So, opening up the Quran, reading Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? I got actually quite surprised very, very quickly because I was expecting somehow to find the devil within the Quran. Genuinely, listening to all of those Christian apologists, I thought that somehow by just reading the Quran, I'm going to find so much evil and the devil will present himself to me in this book. And then I will declare Christ is king and I will return to Christianity stronger than ever. But yeah, reading the Quran, as I said, after a few pages, it was just so logical, so concise, so coherent that I was convinced pretty much from the get-go. And I remember this clearly, talking to my wife and telling her about what I just read. And she knew that it was over. Our Christian life just collapsed. Because, as I said, I went into all kinds of different belief systems. And every time I did, I went full force, 100%. I never pulled back. If I commit to something, I commit to it 100%. I need to understand it, as I said. And once I started reading the Quran, my wife already knew, she told me later, that she lost the Christian Bobby. He was gone because I said, hey, listen, don't you read here? The Trinity really doesn't make sense. I think the Christians kind of went wrong there. So I already started talking essentially from an Islamic standpoint. However, I couldn't accept it because of my past. And therefore I said, I'm going to read the Quran first. Then I'm going to read Hadith. Then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I kept on postponing, ultimately even telling myself, I have to learn Arabic completely before I even accept Islam, which is, of course, ridiculous. But my point of the story is that after I finished the Quran, I already knew in my heart that this is it. This is crystal clear, and this is where my journey was going. I was seeking God. God alone is only found within Islam and nowhere else. In a nutshell, Buddhism, there is no God at all. Hinduism, there is one God, they say, but he manifests in millions of gods. So now worship those, even though one of those gods is Kali, the god of destruction. So yeah, that makes sense. Let's just worship a demon of destruction and call that God then. Then you go further into the branches, Jainism and whatnot, or you go into what else? Abrahamic faiths. I find that even more ridiculous because if you claim it is an Abrahamic faith, then it must be the faith of Abraham. You look into Judaism, the only thing that kind of appears monotheistic at least, but at the same time, do they truly practice what Abraham practiced? I don't think so, especially if you look into the ethnocentrism of that religion. Judaism is for the chosen people, and everybody else is just a Gentile. So me, little goyim here, the Gentile, I can't even convert to Judaism even if I wanted to. Christianity, already mentioned it, the Trinity. So that's not monotheism. That is not the faith of Abraham. Abraham didn't pray to Jesus, not at all. So therefore, what is left truly and what does Islam propose? Islam says that there is nobody worthy of worship but the one God. That's it. That's what I've been looking for. And I believe that this is what every truly spiritually seeking person is looking for, but they're not ready to acknowledge it because they see Islam either as an enemy, as a threat, as something foreign, something that does not belong in their Western life or what not. But the reality is that it is the only truth because of the pure monotheism, because of Tawheed. And this was crystal clear to me after reading the Quran. But nevertheless, it took me still some time wrestling with it, back and forth, due to my upbringing. And it was a tough decision to make, if you will, on a dunya level, on a superficial level, because yes, in Northern Macedonia, my family members, they're Orthodox Christians, and they all hold this belief that Islam is the enemy. And matter of fact, after accepting Islam, my father cut the contact with me, and to this very day, I haven't talked with him at all, zero. We have no contact whatsoever. My mother, my sister, I didn't talk to them for over a year. Now, slowly, contact is coming back. With many other family members, I have no contact either. So, in terms of dunya gains, I had everything to lose, right? But I didn't care because I wanted the truth. And I said to myself, no matter where I will find the truth, I will go for it. So it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it is in the enemy's camp. I will submit to the truth once I found it. And Alhamdulillah, so I did.
What finally convinced you to accept Islam?
I would say it was the Quran initially, but what finally convinced me, what the last ultimately epiphany was a dream that I had. So what happened is I read the whole Quran, as I said. I started reading Hadith. I started looking further and further into Islam. I started talking about it on my channel. And this is something that I did on my channel previously as well. I call my channel Bobby's Perspective because it is Bobby's Perspective. That's all it is. I never gave it a specific title. Let's say when I was into bodybuilding, I didn't call it bodybuilding.com. When I was into New Age, I didn't call it New Age shortcuts or whatnot. It was always about my perspective and what I do in life, and I simply liked sharing it with people. Ultimately, it was due to me, as I said, leaving Germany, traveling the world. I left my family behind, but I left my friends behind as well. And back in the day, I always met up with my friends at least once daily, sometimes even multiple times per day. We would hang out, we would talk, we would share stories. And once I started traveling, I started missing that. And this is how I started my YouTube channel ultimately. And I called it Bobby's Perspective, and I simply talked to my audience the same way that I talk to my friends as well. And so, matter of fact, I started sharing about Islam then on my channel, which alienated a lot of my previous viewers. But this is something that I'm, again, used to, because every time I would switch the topic of my content, people would come, people would leave. But anyhow, through my YouTube channel, I actually started meeting Muslims. They would write me on my live streams, they would write in my comment section. And it so happened that a brother reached out to me via live stream, and he said that he is in Thailand right now. And he is originally from Germany as well. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let's link up. And so it was him that brought me to the masjid for the very first time. And this is a moment as well that I will never forget. There are many moments that I will never forget, but this one is definitely very memorable for me personally. I went to the masjid for the very first time because before that, as I said, it was enemy's territory for me. I couldn't imagine entering. I thought they are building bombs in there and whatnot. I had all the cliches in my mind. And he brought me to the masjid in Koh Samui, which is a beautiful tropical island in Thailand. And matter of fact, there was an Islamic village with an Islamic school. And it just so happened that all the school children that day were there in attendance for the prayer. And even the Adhan was recited by a school child, a schoolboy. And for me, this was the most non-threatening environment that you can imagine, of course, because I was imagining evil, evil Islam and God knows what. But now I enter and it's full with kids, and everybody is greeting me with Salaam Alaikum, giving me their hands. And it was such a warm environment. It was unbelievable. And I fell in love there with Islam in reality, because before that, it was all me reading the Quran, researching it online. But now I saw Islam, how it is lived in my environment. And this was absolutely unbelievable. So I fell in love with it, that I started going to Jummah on Fridays and I started praying at home, but I didn't accept Islam yet, right? So I was doing pretty much everything you have to do. I don't eat pork anyways. So even before my reversion, I wasn't eating pork. I wasn't drinking alcohol. All of those vices I had to let go way, way before reverting to Islam. Alhamdulillah for that. But still, I didn't take my Shahada. And what happened then is, at one point, I got a dream. And in this dream, I find myself floating, levitating over an Islamic city. Which one it is, I cannot tell you. I have no clue. Now, looking back, I'm thinking maybe it was Baghdad back in the day. I'm not sure. It just looked so epic, so amazing. And you see all the minarets everywhere. And I'm floating, I'm flying above this city. And all of a sudden, I hear the adhan. I hear the shahada. But I don't hear it coming from the masjid. It comes from my heart in this dream.
Subhanallah.
And it starts building up, it starts building up, it starts building up, and it tries to exit out of my mouth. And I feel that it's coming on. And what I do in this dream is I hold my mouth shut so I don't proclaim it. But then my heart speaks it anyways. And it bursts out of my heart and it exits my body. And you hear it
Subhanallah.
over the tops of that city. You hear the adhan coming out of me. So, which was essentially for me now by the declaration of the heart ultimately. And after waking up from that dream, I realized I am already Muslim. Now I just have to declare it with my lips ultimately. And this is why I always say as well that you're not a Muslim in that sense when you take the Shahada, of course. I mean, that's the formal way of doing it. But you are already a Muslim before voicing it because you have to believe it first, right? It has to happen before you say it. So if I, for example, say, I have a full set of hair, that would be a lie, right? And I can't possibly believe that because it's not true. But I do have a bald head. So if I think of myself as somebody that has a bald head, now I just need to speak it. But first I need to realize that, right? So it's a silly example, but just to paint a picture. With Islam, once the Shahada was declared by my internal state, by my heart, I of course knew that I am a Muslim, and now it's just a question of time until I formally announce it. But the switch already happened. And so what happened then is Sheikh Uthman all of a sudden reaches out to me and he's like, hey man, what's up? I'm in Indonesia right now. Matter of fact is I had a podcast with him where he answered all of my questions way back in the beginning of my journey. And at the end of that podcast, because he answered all my questions accordingly, he said, okay, are you ready to take the Shahada now? And I said, no way. I'm not going to do it online. Most definitely not. And I have a few more questions at some point, but I'm definitely not going to do it online. And he said, man, whenever you're ready, even if you have to give me a call, we have to do it together. And I said, okay, so be it. Absolutely. You have my word. And I'm a man of my word because I said it to him. I said, I have to do the Shahada with him now. It is what it is. I can't even do it by myself. This is really how much I value when you give somebody your word. And matter of fact, just when I had this dream, a few days later, maybe 2 or 3 days later, Sheikh Uthman reached out to me and he said he's in Indonesia at the moment. And he's planning on potentially coming to Thailand if I want to meet up. And I said, absolutely, man. You have no idea how much I actually want to link up. So when are you coming? And he told me that it's going to take still 2 weeks roughly. And those were the longest 2 weeks of my life because then I was ready to take the Shahada, but I said that I'm going to take it with Sheikh Uthman. And I remember hanging out with my brother here, with my friend from Germany, and he said it every day, man, you have to take care, bro. You have to say the Shahada, just do it for yourself. I had visions, I had dreams, Shaitan was behind you. You were riding on a motorbike through Bangkok traffic. Bro, you have to do it now. But I said, nah, I believe that Allah will grant me 2 more weeks, inshallah, and he did, alhamdulillah. And so I waited until Sheikh Uthman came, and then we finalized the whole process, made it formal.
Beautiful
Yeah.
story. What was your biggest challenge after becoming a Muslim?
The biggest challenge would be hands down the family, ultimately. Again, I live in Thailand, so therefore I'm not surrounded by my mother, father, aunts, and uncles anymore. I live a new life here in Thailand. I'm here with my family, with my wife, with my kids. But nevertheless, I would have visited more often, or they would have visited more often over the past 2 years if it wasn't due to my conversion. So the biggest challenge is the lacking contact with my family. So as I said, my father doesn't talk to me at all anymore. My mother barely, my sister a little bit more, and many other family members, cousins and whatnot, ultimately say that I became a Turchin, a Turk, or a Shqiptar, which is an Albanian. So for them, it's highly nationalistic. They don't understand that it is religious, that it is faith. They see it as something national, something cultural. So that was most definitely, yeah, the biggest challenge, that they simply don't want any part of my life anymore. They don't see me as the person that I was before. That would be the biggest challenge. But at the same time, I have to say that I'm very, very content and very happy the way that it is. And I expected it to an extent anyhow. And I'm not the first one that would face such challenges. Even the Sahaba faced such challenges with their parents, with their initial religion. So, yeah, this is just to be expected. And Islam is not only about this life, it's about the akhirah, it's about the afterlife. And therefore, I am very, very content that my eternity is saved, inshallah. And whatever happens here happens. You know what I mean? I cannot be too bothered with it.
How did your perspective on life change after converting to Islam?
Man, that's a very deep question. That's very good. I would say that it became clearer, much clearer and more balanced. So before Islam, I was very extreme. And that is something that many from the West won't properly understand, because when they think Islam, they think extreme. They cannot understand why a woman would cover. They don't understand why you grow out your beard. They don't understand why you have to pray 5 times per day. All of that is very extreme to them, right? But for me now, looking back, liberalism is very extreme, very, very extreme. To jump from partner to partner before you ever consider getting married, not to have children at all in your 40s, even drinking alcohol, doing drugs, doing whatever you want to do. That is very, very, very extreme to me. But that is normal life for the majority in the West, right? So I come from an extreme background in terms of whatever I did it to the extreme. However, those subjects that I pursued, they were not balanced within themselves. For example, you go into Buddhism, Buddhism teaches vegetarianism, veganism. So I went full force into that, depleted my body, got nutritionally deficient, got all kinds of sicknesses due to that practice. Then you go into the psychedelic realm, shamanism, where you just spend hours and hours in a hallucination, ultimately in the jungle by yourself, pursuing truth. That is very extreme. And so with Islam, it became enormously balanced, be it dietarily, be it socially, be it spiritually, be it politically. Islam clarifies every subject matter in my life. There is an answer for everything, there is a solution for everything. And matter of fact, the answer and the solution is always the right one. That is what is so funny for me as well, because many atheists or whatnot, they will tell you, yeah, well, people simply look for some sort of belief system that will give them some answers. But there are many belief systems that give you random answers. I was looking for the truth in every subject, right? Leading by the ultimate truth of following one God alone. But then how does it trickle down into your life? How does it trickle down into your relationships, etc., in your family? So Islam has a teaching, the right teaching, I would of course claim, for every situation in life. And therefore, it has been easy for me. It has been a breath of fresh air, ultimately, because I know every time when I see that something is wrong and I can assess it accordingly. It has been absolutely amazing. Yeah, clarity would be the word.
Mm. What do you think is the most beautiful aspect of your faith?
Where to start, man? Everything about it. But I would say the prayer is the most beautiful aspect of the faith, I would say. Because, look, When I was still a Christian, I was looking for a faith that I can practice, but there was no real practice within the faith. So, yes, you could go to the church, and in the church, they would have their sacraments, they would eat the bread, they would drink the wine, they would do the liturgy, they would do their rituals, and you can partake in that if you want. But even if you do, what do you do in your daily basis? What is there for you to do? You have no dietary restrictions whatsoever, so you can eat whatever you want, you can drink alcohol if you want. Of course, the Bible says that you shouldn't get drunk, but nevertheless, you can enjoy life ultimately whatever you like, and you don't have to pray. So I was really wondering, okay, where is the practice now? Where is the guidance in the religion? If you, for example, go to a martial arts school, a boxing school, they will teach you everything bit by bit, how you have to stand, how you have to position your guard, everything, the drills, right, the distance management, what have you. And you will come to the classes 5 times per week, running in the morning, sparring on Wednesdays, on Saturdays. There will be a plan for everything according to your goal. And now we're speaking about our goal is to come close to God. You will tell me that in your religion, you don't have a regiment. There is no plan at all. The Bible says pray without ceasing, which means pray as much as you can. Okay, great. But what does that mean? Does it mean I'm praying 24 hours now? Does it mean I pray whenever I want to? This is really what it boils down to. No, in Islam, the prayer is just, for me personally, the absolute best because it always brings you back to Allah. It always brings you back to God. You have to pray 5 times per day, no matter what you do. That is the hands down strongest aspect of Islam, let alone the practice in itself. Because I mentioned we went to the masjid with my friend here in Koh Samui, Thailand for the very first time. I didn't know what to expect. And it was prayer time. I didn't expect to go there to pray. I only wanted to see the mosque from the inside. But all of a sudden, it's prayer time. My brother, my friend, he kind of tricked me into it. And he says, just do what I do. I'm like, okay. And so we were just men, obviously, standing there, facing one direction and just bowing to God. And for me, this was such an eye-opening experience because I realized, oh, wow. Before this, I would go into this dark church. Some candles would be lit. You would do the cross 3 times. You have to go in a circle 3 times. Now you have to eat the bread. Now you have to eat the wine. Now you have to do this, that, left, right. For what, really? What are we doing? But in Islam, we all just lined up, equal, everybody, shoulder to shoulder, just praying to the one God that created us all. Simple, straightforward, absolutely coherent, congruent, true. And that's why, for me, the prayer was what truly opened my eyes, and it is the most beautiful thing to this very day.
Why should people learn about Islam?
Okay, why should they learn about Islam? In one word, truth. If you're interested in the truth, you should find out, right? You shall find out what the truth is if you're truly interested in it. This, for me, is the main reason. I wouldn't tell you you need to read about something that is not true. I wouldn't bother whatsoever. There is no real value behind it, no worth. Why would you? Hey, you should really listen to German techno music. Hey, that's really good. Whatever, it's asinine, it's benign. We're talking about absolute truth claims. This is why they should look into it, because it's true. And I say, with this given statement, if you don't believe me saying that it's the truth, that's absolutely amazing, that's fine. Then go and do your own research. Go and read the Quran, study Islam, look for yourself, and maybe you're going to come to a different conclusion then, right? At least let's give it the benefit of the doubt and pursue truth. That is the main reason. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to benefit you. It was, what was his name again? The teacher of Zakir Naik. Can you help me out?
I believe Ahmed Didat, Sheikh Ahmed.
Ahmed Didat.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ahmed Didat said that Islam will succeed with or without you. You won't benefit Islam. Islam will only benefit you, right? So therefore, let's not fool ourselves and say, hey, he, she, they all have to learn about Islam because of this and this, and it's so beneficial. No, listen, Without Islam, we are all lost because we are all lost without the truth. It's that simple. That is the reality of things. You're going through life without having access to the truth. How bad does it get? It's like a chicken with no head. It's terrible to be in that state. If you don't mind, if you don't bother to be in such a state, then go on with your life. Like the rat in the Matrix, he says, ignorance is bliss. There is a scene where he eats the steak and he knows that the steak is not really real because he's been red pilled. He came out of the Matrix. But now he just wants to return and make believe. He wants to believe that that steak is still real because ignorance is bliss. So if you want to stay in ignorance, and I understand that many people do, don't look into Islam. No worries. But if you want the truth, then you owe it to yourself to pursue it. That's how I see it.
What advice would you give to someone considering converting to Islam?
Do it. Don't wait like I did. I mean, ultimately, when I look back, there was no other way for me. So everything in the end is beautiful, just the way that it happened. But I would say that if you believe that there is nobody else worthy of worship but God, you're already there ultimately. You already believe in the truth, and therefore you should pursue reverting to Islam. And we say reverting to Islam, of course, because we believe that it's our natural predisposition, our fitra, which means we are born in the state of submitting to God alone. And then our parents, depending on the cultural context, give us other concepts, such as worship Krishna and Arjuna, and worship Jesus and Mary, and do this and do that. But ultimately, our innate predisposition says, declares, there's only one God worthy of worship. And if you believe that anyways, don't postpone. Don't buy the hype, so to speak, of the evangelicals on YouTube, all of those anti-Islamists, call them what you will, that tell you fancy stories they made up. No, if you believe that, you're already there, and then simply pursue it.
Some people believe that they need to learn more or even everything about Islam before they take their shahada. Is that really the case?
That's what I thought as well. As I mentioned, I read the whole Quran, and at first I said, I'm going to read the whole Quran, and then I'm going to dismantle Islam. But then, meanwhile, I was reading, I said, okay, if I really consider accepting Islam, I should read the whole Quran first. So I did. But then after that, that wasn't enough. So I said, oh, now I should read all the hadith there are, if I ever could do that. And then I said, oh, well, I should learn Arabic as well. I have to know everything about it, which is kind of insane, truly, because you would never do that with any other faith. I know people that converted to Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and whatnot, and nobody did such extensive research ever. But when it comes down to Islam, people have those grandiose visions of that they have to understand everything. They have to become a scholar basically before accepting Islam. But as I said, it's insane. If you look into how Islam came about, the Quran has been revealed for over 20 years. But you had Muslims after the first couple of recitations, right? So the early Muslims, they didn't even have access to the full Quran, but they already accepted Islam, right? So saying you need to read the whole Quran in order to accept Islam wouldn't be true, wouldn't be factual, wouldn't be historical. If you look back in history, they accepted it because they got the message. And the message was in pagan Arabia to stop the idol worship, to worship God alone. And then over years, the Sharia was laid out, the laws, everything. But it took over 2 decades, right? But still you had people from the early onset on. This is what I have to say to everybody else as well. So yes, you can read the whole Quran if you think you need to do that. But ultimately it boils down to La ilaha illallah.
Right, beautifully said. What should born Muslims know about converts?
That's an interesting question. I would say that they have to be a bit more forgiving, but I can only speak from the online sphere. Because to be honest, me as a revert here in Thailand, I've been welcomed by everybody, and they absolutely are loving, welcoming from the get-go. For me, everything was amazing here in Thailand. I have to say, Thai Muslims are amongst the best people that I ever met in my life. I went to Dubai as well, met up with some subscribers, some viewers of mine. I had very, very positive experiences. But online, on the other hand, I see that many reverts get a lot of flag by the haram police, if you will, and they get a lot of backlash for things that they still do. So I'll say have patience with reverts as well, because they ultimately come from a completely different background, depending on the person, and they need time to learn. So that's what I would say to born Muslims.
Bobby, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart from being my guest. It was truly an honor to have you here.
Nah, man, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much for having me, brother.
Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know has a story of embracing Islam, we'd love to hear it. Your journey could inspire and uplift others. Feel free to reach out to share your story on this channel. Let's continue to celebrate the beauty of faith and the diversity of our experiences. Please share this video and don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful content. See you in the next one, inshallah.